Our buddy Alex Kennedy, HoopsHype.com, here on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN. We've got, 15 games in for the Sixers. A lot to talk about. This NBA season, Draymond Green, Boston, Toronto, Milwaukee, and others. Let's bring Alex into the conversation here on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN. Welcome back, Alex. How you been, pal?
Hey, doing well. How are you?
We're all good. Of course, Alex, you can follow him on Twitter at Alex Kennedy NBA. And that tweet that Alex put out the other day was kind of all over the place, especially here locally, concerning Markelle Fultz and Drew Hanlon and that whole falling out, I guess. And you might not have the particulars of how and why this all happened. Maybe you do. I don't know. But it sounds like a pretty concerning story that these two guys all of a sudden just decided, or maybe Fultz just decided, that we're not going to move forward here, and how that might impact him moving forward.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, they worked together all summer. You know, we had talked about it here on the station about their work together and what they were doing, and it seemed like they were moving in a positive direction. And then it seems like the end of October, they had a falling out, and now Fultz has moved on. Drew Hanlon will continue to train Joel Embiid, so he'll still be around the team at times, which kind of makes things awkward a bit. He's still going to be around, and from everything that I've heard, Fultz, and Hanlon still think highly of each other. At the moment, they're not really speaking because the situation is really awkward. But without getting into any particulars, I would say Fultz doesn't have a problem with Hanlon. Hanlon doesn't have a problem with Fultz, but there are circumstances and outside factors that are weighing the situation that have led to this separation. And it's unfortunate because I think he was, really making some progress under Hanlon. Now there's some talk about him potentially going back to the trainer that he was using during the pre-draft process, and I know a lot of people are kind of scared to hear that because that's the trainer that initially was talking about, changing his shot coming out of college. So I think a lot more is going to come out in regards to this story eventually. I'll say that. There's a lot going on here. But right now, I think, everyone's focused on the positive in Philly. Obviously bringing in Jimmy Butler, trying to get Markelle Fultz on, the right track. I think any kind of negative story doesn't need to be in the forefront right now, even if there is some behind-the-scenes drama. There's too much to be excited about. So I think that's kind of the focus right now. And anything else really is kind of on the back burner or, being pushed down because, they don't want to distract from, this blockbuster move. I mean, at the end of the day, it's pretty incredible that after 3 seasons winning, 28 games, now you have 2 All-NBA players and the reigning Rookie of the Year. There's a lot to be excited about. So I would just hate for, a story that is negative or a story about, that has a lot of drama involved would overshadow that. So I think that's kind of this situation right now.
Alex, let me defer to your knowledge and expertise in the world of social media, the digital world, and it's no knock on a guy who's been around for 60, 70 years covering a team, but the reality is that you understand it. So I'll take you and others off the hook covering these guys. How much responsibility, and I'm not anti, let me preface this, let the kid do whatever the hell he wants on Instagram and Twitter, but how much responsibility does Markelle Fultz own by putting out a tweet or an Instagram post that we all know is leading towards a Hanlon or a benching or something like that, and still trying to maintain sympathy from the world of the NBA and beyond as well?
Yeah, it's so interesting. I've had this conversation with players. I wrote a whole article about players in the social media era and how really, these guys are competitors, they're emotional, they're impulsive, and when they feel something, they turn to social media because many of these guys, especially a guy like Fultz, the young guys that grew up with social media, they don't know a world without MySpace or Facebook or Twitter. These guys always had social media growing up, so whenever they're feeling something, they turn to it. They send out a tweet, they send out an Instagram post or a Snapchat post. I mean, I think that's kind of the norm now in the NBA, and it's unfortunate. I would tell guys not to put any of that kind of stuff on social media because it just leads to more drama. It leads to a lot of questions. I think fans don't like it because at the end of the day, you're putting something out there and people are wondering what it's about. Are you upset with the team? Are you upset with your trainer? Is it something completely unrelated to basketball? In some cases it is. It's kind of like the Facebook post where someone, says, man, had a horrible day, and then just doesn't really, elaborate.
Right,
right.
Dot.
They want all the comments. Yeah, they want all the comments, people saying, oh, what's wrong, what's going on? But then they don't say anything. I think it's so much better to just stay off that kind of stuff. I'm all for using social media to connect with fans, to promote certain causes that you feel are great. But when you use it for reasons like that, and we see it more and more now today, guys do petty things on social media. Guys do kind of, try to get sympathy, or they try to, or they just, lash out on social media. And I think it's not a good look, but it's not going to change. Agents right now and PR people right now are very frustrated because they're dealing with this, every year a new incoming group of rookies that are younger and younger and don't know life without social media and feel like they can post everything because they've been doing it since they were 10 years old. So it's going to be a really hard trade. It's not going anywhere, I'll say that. But I agree with you. I think there's some problems with that.
Alex, I want to stick with the social media topic here real quick because I want your thoughts on this. Fultz retweeted an old tweet of his that said, you really can't trust anyone. Now, does that have to do with Drew Hanlon? Does that have to do with the Jimmy Butler trade? I kind of want your thoughts on that. And how do you see the Butler addition playing out with Fultz? Is that going to help him long term? Or we all know Butler's competitive nature. Is Fultz going to kind of put his tail in between his legs and shy away from his potential new role with this team?
Well, starting off, I don't know what the retweet's about. I'll start with that.
Yeah.
From what I know about the Drew Hanlon situation, I don't think there was a trust factor broken. So I don't think that's related to Hanlon. I'll say that.
Well, Alex, real quick, can I jump in? Do you think that any trust factor was broken last year? I think it was last year or summertime, right? Summertime, pardon me. When Drew Hanlon was on an interview, I think it went national, right? Where he kind of said that Markelle Fultz had the yips.
Mm.
Oh, I mean, yeah, and certainly I think we've seen Fultz has been very upset anytime anyone suggests that. He has been upset whenever there was a commentator during a game that suggested that. I think Hanlon suggested that at some point. I want to say even Brett Brown at some point mentioned something mental, and it upset Markelle Fultz. But then you also have the situation where I think a week or two ago, Drew Hanlon said he's still injured, and then that really upset Markelle Fultz, and he said he's not injured. So Right. It's like, I think you have to wonder, okay, what is it then? Are you saying it's an injury? Are you saying it's mental? There's just a lot going on there. I'm just saying I don't think the retweet had to do – maybe the initial tweet had to do with that. I really don't know. That's very possible. I have no idea what you're tweeting about. Again, when you tweet big stuff like that, no one knows what you're talking about. And, I think people – whatever narrative they want to, shape, they kind of use that because it's so big. But from what I know about the Hanlon and Fultz split, I don't think that there was any kind of trust broken here.
Got it.
So I don't think that the retweet was about that. But I do think, as far as Jimmy Butler and Markelle Fultz are concerned, I don't think it's going to be an issue. I see a lot of people concerned about Fultz, and I understand kind of from the outside looking in why that would be an issue. But the guys that Butler gets on are the guys that don't work hard, that don't want to improve, and that's not Fultz. Fultz spends tons of time in the gym. He's constantly trying to work on his game. He's been a disappointment for sure, and there are certainly issues. But, the guys that Butler can't stand are the ones that don't try to maximize their full potential, that don't love the game of basketball. The guys that, could be getting better and have all this untapped potential, but sit at home and don't want to go train. So I don't think he's going to have issues with Fultz. There was talk about that with Andrew Wiggins in Minnesota. There's been talk about, he has had some issues with soft players, but soft is it's a hard, it's one of those labels that gets thrown around a lot. But I think everything I've heard so far, Butler and Fultz, I could see them. Actually, I could see Butler helping Fultz because it's just another person to take the pressure off of him. I'm so glad he didn't go to a franchise where he had to be the savior right away. He's so lucky that he went to Philly, where he has Embiid and Simmons and now Butler, really he can kind of get through whatever is going on right now, behind closed doors and without all the pressure on him that he would have as a normal number 1 overall pick, where you're looked at as a savior. So I think it could actually help him. We'll see, though. I mean, I think it's going to be interesting to see how they all play together.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, Alex, because I kind of said that too, is like, I think this actually helps him now because he was, let's be honest, he was brought here and they didn't potentially make a move this offseason because they wanted to give him the chance to show that he had this potential of why they drafted him, right? Like, he's going to be this dynamic scorer with this rebuilt shot, and he's going to be everything that we've potentially lacked. I think a couple of games in, they realize there's something holding him back, and we need to go in another direction. But what I think it does, it puts him they can put him on the floor now more readily because his offense isn't now a necessity. It's just an added bonus, where in the beginning of this year, I think they needed his offense to be a necessity, and he wasn't able to give it. So I agree with you that this allows him potentially to grow in a more background role.
Yeah, exactly. Rather than being counted on as the number 3 guy and having that kind of pressure on him, you have Butler, who is a great scorer, averaging over 20 points per game. And one thing that Joel Embiid last night said at the Sixers Magic game, he said, what Jimmy Butler brings is something that we have never had, and that's someone that can create their own shot off the dribble and, make plays for themselves. So, I mean, that's something that Butler brings to this team, and he's right. The other guys, it's a lot of catch-and-shoot type threes, or Embiid can do it in certain spots, but Butler's one of those guys that can kind of score from anywhere. So I think, I think that it moves. There's less pressure on Fultz. He's going to be a 4th option. He's going to come off the bench. He didn't start, obviously, last night. It seems like the lineup they're going to go with going forward is going to be that lineup of, Simmons, Redick, Butler, Wilson, Chandler, and Embiid. So he's going to come off the bench, have a chance to be that 6th man, not as much pressure on him. And at the end of the day, I still don't feel like it's time to give up on this kid. He's still 20 years old. It's crazy. Even if it takes him 2 or 3 more years, he's so far. I mean, I know that sounds horrible to Sixers fans. They don't want to hear that, but
we've been patient in the past.
No, yeah, I get it. I know after the process and everything like that, you guys have proven your patience, and it sucks to hear to think you're gonna have to wait that long for a number 1 overall pick to start contributing at a high level. But my point is, he is still so young, and I think we all know how much we change mentally and how much we mature. From age 20 to 23, 24, what he could be in a few years from now. I just think it's too early to give up on the kid. If this is mental, which I think most people agree that there's some mental aspect of it, even if it started as a physical thing, even if there's a little bit of physical thing left, if this is mental, I think he could eventually get over that. It's a matter of building that confidence back up, and I'm curious to see if he can do it. Like I said, I think having Butler, a guy that, as much as he's been criticized for, his clashes with young players in the past, I think he demands greatness from guys. He pushes guys. And like I said, Fultz is the kind of guy that he was the last player outside of their, to get out of shoot-around yesterday. He works extremely hard, and having a guy like Butler pushing him and helping him may actually be good. It may actually help him.
Yeah, Alex, I look at the future, and in the backdrop is the conversation of, Markelle Fultz struggled again, or Markelle Fultz wasn't great last night, therefore let's look and find a way to trade him, or how long before they trade him. And I feel like Markelle Fultz, the time to trade him as what he is now was probably past, meaning everybody knows, including the Sixers, that he's probably right now best served as the 6th, 7th guy on your team. So that's not going to improve. Like, he's not going to further solidify that moving forward. If anything, he'll show and turn into a guy who might be able to play quality starter minutes and maybe work his way into like a 5-6 guy on your team. But at that point, the Sixers aren't going to turn around and say, well, now his stock's up, let's trade him. So it's almost like, to your point, and looking at the realistic scenario of him on the floor growing, the idea of trading him is past.
Right. I had the conversation with people last night at the Sixers game that if you try to trade Markelle Fultz right now, I'm never a fan of trading a guy when their value is very low. And, right now, unfortunately, his value is very low. Now, there is still the whole upside potential aspect of things, and that's where there are always GMs out there that look at a player that has potential that's very young, and they say, oh, I can fix him. I can be the one that brings out his, I can maximize his potential. But with Fultz, we've never really seen a case like this where a guy, has completely changed his shot, and I think now, kind of going away from the trainer that he was with all summer and apparently looking great all summer. I want to clarify, it wasn't just Hanlon talking about Fultz looking good over the summer. It was players that were playing scrimmages against him. They were saying he looked like the college version of Markelle Fultz. So that makes me think it's even more mental, where if he's able to dominate a scrimmage or a practice or, look great in the offseason, and then as soon as he gets into an NBA game, he's kind of freaking out again, that's a problem. So, yeah, I mean, to your point, I think right now Markelle Fultz, unfortunately, for Sixers fans that want to trade him, he has much more value to the Sixers because if you deal him, you're not going to get much back in return because teams are kind of looking at him as, a player that's kind of going through something and they don't know what's going to happen. They don't even, with everything Sixers know, teams know even less. There's a lot of uncertainty surrounding him. So, and you look at what teams, what players fetch these days. Jimmy Butler didn't even fetch a first-round pick. Paul George didn't fetch a first-round pick. I mean, if you're going to trade a guy like Markelle Fultz, do you give him up for, a role player and a second-round pick? Or do you hope that eventually he turns into a contributor that can be that fourth option or, a great sixth man? I think you're better off holding on to him because the value's not there.
Talk with Alex Kennedy, HoopsHype.com, at Alex Kennedy NBA. Let me ask you, because we kind of debated this at the beginning, and I'm not sitting here suggesting that right now that Fultz is further along than Ben Simmons, but have you seen – were you in Orlando last night, Alex?
Yeah, I went to the shoot-around in the morning, and I was at the game last night in Orlando, yeah. Okay,
so last night, I mean, I think there's a lot of people last night that would almost suggest that Fultz was a little bit more productive than even Simmons was in the game last night. But over maybe like the last 4 or 5 games, other than the fact that he has a block when he shoots, that hitch he had the other night in the free throw, which kind of came out of nowhere, he has been pretty decent in terms of that. Would you suggest watching him that he has slowly become a more competent player in the last 2-3 weeks?
Oh, for sure. And there are certainly moments where you look at like a quarter where you see him and he clearly has a lot more confidence. Everyone wants to talk about that free throw, and he's playing the ball slipped. But there are certainly moments where he looks way more confident. There's been moments where he's playing way more aggressive on defense, which is great to see. There's been moments where he's been getting out in transition and dunking the ball and finishing at the rim. There are things that he can bring to the table even when his shot isn't falling. That's kind of one of the things that people forget about a guy like Fultz because he is so athletic. He is trying to play so much better defensively this year than he had in the past. That was kind of one thing he had to work on a little bit. I think he has definitely shown improvement. And now really the question is, can he play alongside this core? One thing that I talked to a lot of players about last night was the ability to go small. We saw last night, Ben Simmons, Markelle Fultz, J.J. Redick, Wilson Chandler, and Jimmy Butler were on the floor. That was their 5-man unit. So Ben Simmons was running point on offense and then guarding the 5 on defense. So I think when you have like that kind of versatility, that kind of small ball unit, this team has the ability to go really small, but then they can also go really big with Embiid, who's one of the, arguably the best center in the NBA. They can go big around him as well. So Brett Brown has a ton of rotations to work with. I think he has to find the right one to maximize Fultz and put the right guys around him that's going to help him succeed. And I think, right now he's tinkering with this whole roster. Obviously, with a guy like Butler coming in, you're going to have to do a lot of tinkering and figuring out what works best. But I do think Fultz has looked more confident and can be a contributor.
Alex, what does Joel Embiid have to do to outplay Anthony Davis and the usual suspects in the backcourt and wing when it comes to the top 4 or 5 guys in the NBA to actually be considered, not just a throw-in at number 5 is Joel Embiid, but to legit be considered as an MVP? And listen, I'm not saying if the season ended now, would he be? I'm asking what would he continue to need to do so that when someone asks you this question, I don't know, at the end of February, it's something similar. We have a concrete idea.
Right. I think one of the biggest things we've seen from MVP voters, aside from Russell Westbrook, which was kind of an outlier year because of the triple-double, you have to be, near the top of your conference in terms of wins. That's where, I look at some of the, guys that are in contention right now. The New Orleans Pelicans right now aren't even in the top 8 in the Western Conference. So as well as the guys Anthony Davis is playing, there's going to be voters that hold that against him and say, okay, we can't really pick him because he's not, leading his team to a top record. The guys that I think are going to be in the running for this award are the guys that are on, one of the, top 3 teams in each conference. That's why I got Kawhi Leonard right now, for example, who's playing great, leading Toronto to a 12-3 record, top of the Eastern Conference. He's getting a lot of MVP talk and a lot of love. A guy like Giannis Antetokounmpo. It's really where I look at teams that you have to lead your team to a really great record and be toward the top of the conference and put up monster numbers. And I think one of the big things, too, is that voters want to see that you don't have help. That's kind of why we've seen, Kevin Durant and Stephen Curry cancel each other out. We've seen that happen a number of times now where if a guy has too much help on his team, they say, okay, he's not doing it alone. That's why, a guy like Kawhi Leonard or a guy like Anthony Davis, we talk about them a lot because they are kind of putting the team on their back and putting up these monster stats. So when they are winning and putting up these crazy records, you're attributing it to them and them mostly alone. That's where I think the Jimmy Butler trade could actually hurt Embiid's MVP candidacy. If Butler's putting up monster numbers as well, do they cancel each other out a little bit? I hope not, because I think Embiid is worth it. I think he's definitely worthy and he should be in the mix. But I think just getting to the top of the conference, if they can have the 1 or 2 seeds, that's going to do wonders for him. And the numbers are going to be there. Right. He's going to put up crazy numbers. So I think it's mainly about wins at this point.
Isn't there, by the way, a financial reason why the Sixers, is that still that if he wins the MVP, that his contract becomes a hit to the cap number for them?
Minutes restriction. Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm just saying, maybe you don't want him to win the MVP quite yet because that could hurt their summer cap number. Wasn't that something tied to that, Alex?
Yeah, so that's been one of the interesting things to kind of watch over in recent years. The incentives that are in contracts. Every contract's structured a little differently. Certain contracts have incentive clauses. Embiid's contract is one of the most complicated in recent history because he not only has incentives if he can reach MVP level or All-Star level, he also has how many games did you play? How many minutes did you play? Because they were worried about injury. So they wanted to be able to get out of the contract if he had injury issues as well. So Embiid has this ridiculously complicated contract. I do think they'd have to owe him more money if he won MVP or, had some kind of, postseason award, Defensive Player of the Year, something like that. But there's also, there's the Supermax contract, too, that everyone talks about. But that actually could be an advantage for a team like Philadelphia. That's where Indiana was really bummed when they weren't able to offer that to Paul George. He missed out on, I believe it was the All-NBA team. There are certain criteria a guy has to hit. You have to win MVP. You have to make an All-NBA team twice. There are certain things you have to do. So whenever Paul George did make the All-NBA team, the Pacers were actually frustrated because, the amount of money they could offer versus what the other team could offer, was suddenly there wasn't as big of a gap. So,
right.
Some teams don't want to see their guy win a huge award and have to pay him more money and go into luxury tax. Some teams want the guy to get that Supermax contract to be eligible for it. That way, they're not tempted to go elsewhere because they can get way more money with their incumbent team.
Alex Kennedy, HoopsHype.com, and you can follow him at Alex Kennedy NBA as this season rolls on. We will tap into Alex a heck of a lot more. And last night the Sixers lose in Orlando. Maybe the most concerning, forget the loss, they blew another 16-point lead, a 20-0 run last night. for Orlando. They beat the Sixers last night. It will be Butler's debut in Philly tomorrow night against the Jazz, and we'll have that for you live on 97.3. Alex, we look forward to more conversations down the NBA season, man.
Thanks, Alex.
Thanks, guys. Take care.